Good morning, everyone. You're not running the marathon then? Welcome. Welcome to Brighton Unitarian Church, those of you who have managed to make it, and those of you watching online. My name is Susie, and I'm a member of this church and an interfaith minister. So I'd like to ask Fanny if she wouldn't mind lighting our candle, our chalice candle, as a symbol of our free religious faith, a faith that encourages and sustains us on our journey. Welcome to this place of peace. May its silence heal your spirit. Welcome to this place of memory. May its history warm your soul. And welcome to this place of prophecy and power. And may its vision sustain you. And may we gathered here today be reminded of our highest aspirations. Let us take a few moments to settle ourselves. So in our service today, we will be focusing on the divine feminine and the masculine principles, or archetypes, if you will, which are not genders as such. Both men and women can have them and represent qualities like nurturing, intuition, often associated with female deities, and strength and action and leadership embodied by the masculine. Both principles are considered essential for spiritual balance across many religions, even if their emphasis varies between belief systems. God the Father has its roots in Jewish monotheism, and God the Mother is from Greek philosophical tradition, mystery religions like paganism as well, and Hinduism. And on my little altar is a selection of goddesses. Kali here with the many arms. Kali, she's a free spirit, a warrior fighter of injustice, yet she's deeply compassionate. She's the feminine form of Kala, meaning dark. She symbolizes female creativity and destruction of ego, all that is false. Kuan Yin there at the front is the Buddhist goddess of compassion, mercy and love, and protector of women and children. We've got Mother Mary, of course, and Parvati and her consort Shiva at the back, who in Hindu mythology are a divine couple who represent the union of male and female energies. Their marriage is celebrated as a symbol of cosmic harmony and divine love. So we're going to sing, people. Sons and Daughters, page 6 in the Green Book. As I said in my opening words, we are gathered here together in this place of prophecy and power. And never in my wildest dreams could I have imagined as a little girl growing up that I would be standing in front of a church congregation and leading a worship service. But last week we were reminded of how radical we are as Unitarians, how we've been at the forefront of the struggle for LGBTQ rights, same-sex marriage, and we were also first to accept women as preachers. Gertrude von Petzold was the first woman who trained to be a Unitarian minister, and in a speech to the International Congress in Boston in 1907, she said this: "The early church put women on the same spiritual level with men, but asceticism and priestcraft reduced them to quasi-bondage, silenced their prophecy, and decried their service. Let the church of the 20th century return them their right to prophecy and ministry." It took years, of course, of campaigning for that to be the case in the Church of England. I remember it well. I believe it was 1998 for the Anglican Church. And it's still not true for Catholics. As Diarmaid MacCulloch writes in his recently published book, Lower Than the Angels, the reason is because the church has become so male in its rhetoric and incorporates antique attitudes about male privilege. He believes that male insecurity, needing to hang on to power which traditional religion has handed them, may explain why the contemporary Christianity appeals to a young generation who also align themselves with alt-right power. I think that's interesting. So I'd like to ask Fanny again, if she's still up to it, to light our yin-yang candle, the balance of the opposites in Taoist beliefs, of course. And I'd like us to remember the plight of the women in Afghanistan. And I'd like that symbol for us to send our prayers to those who still have beliefs that don't align with the natural law. And I recently watched a video in which Meryl Streep makes a powerful speech to the UN debate on the world's response to the Taliban government. And she starts with the words, "In 1971, I graduated from college. Women in Switzerland were granted the right to vote. In Afghanistan, they had been able to vote since 1919, before France and the USA. In 1977, 15% of the legislature were women, 70% of teachers, 50% civil servants and students, and 40% of doctors in Kabul were women, along with NGO workers. Women played cricket in a team which has now been disbanded. And I was so saddened to hear that the British team, who had been requested to boycott their match, went ahead. They lost." Just saying. Meryl Streep continued with these stinging words. "Today in Kabul, a female cat has more freedoms than a woman. A cat may go sit on the front stoop and feel the sun on her face. She may chase a squirrel in the park. A squirrel has more rights than a woman or girl in Afghanistan today because the public parks have been closed to women and girls. A bird may sing in Kabul, but a woman may not, and a woman may not in public. This is an extraordinary suppression of the natural law. Odd. Since returning to power, the Taliban have issued more than 100 edicts stripping women of their freedoms and movement, education and employment, and have effectively incarcerated half the population. The international community has a responsibility to intervene. A distorted, fundamentalist fear of the future can upend from the inside. a society can be impeded, and this is a cautionary tale for the rest of the world. So she said this, I think, 3 months ago, or 4 months ago at the UN, before Donald Trump was elected, and Andrew Tate was released from prison and flew to the States. So why am I talking about Afghan women rather than addressing our own issues? Well, I would gently suggest that the way in which a society is openly fearful and discriminatory against women has an echo in all societies that have emerged in the world as patriarchies. There's a spectrum, clearly, and we in the West have immeasurably improved women's lives. However, right now, the improvement felt in matters of diversity are being challenged all over the globe, not least in the USA, where there's been a direct attack on what we used to call equality of opportunity. And now we're seeing more and more men taking up positions of power, and changing times have boosted public demand for more muscular, assertive leadership. For whatever reason, and there may be many, a new archetype of leader has emerged. We are now in the strongman era, according to Ian Bremner in his article of the same name, How Tough Guys Came to Rule the World. A decade ago, it appeared that a revolution in information and communication technologies would empower the individual at the expense of the state. Western leaders believed social networks would create people power, enabling political upheavals like the Arab Spring. But the world's autocrats drew different conclusions, and they saw an opportunity for government to become the dominant player. And beyond these undemocratic countries, social media has been used for propaganda by individuals. And the cautionary tale of Andrew Tate and his hypnotic hold over young men, not the overt type of misogyny propagated by Islamic fundamentalists, but one that cleverly and insidiously addresses the insecurities of young men in a changing world and provides an answer to their issues by making women their nemesis. In the last 5 years, the young men of the Gen Z generation are consciously and assertively now of the opinion that equality has gone too far. And 20% of them in a recent survey believe that women's rights need curbing. In a recent study by York University, boys are using Andrew Tate videos to justify harassment of girls. And 90% of secondary school teachers would like guidance about online misogyny. So, with that in mind, we're going to sing our second hymn, number 99, in the Green Book, When Jesus Walked. So if we can start by a goal within the church has been problematic, I recommend a really interesting book to you by John Philip Newell called Sacred Earth, Sacred Soul. And it goes some way to helping us understand the reasons. And he starts with those early teachings of Jesus. Newell gives a blistering account of the battle that was waged between the early Celtic spiritual beliefs and those of the Roman imperial, more patriarchal one, and the victory, unfortunately, of the latter to the detriment of all of us. He argues that the crisis we are feeling today is due to our dishonoring of the earth, the feminine, and the belittling of the other. And he puts it down to the idea that the Celtic spiritual tradition long emphasized an awareness of the sacred essence of all things, that belief cannot be reduced to dogma, and that we need to keep listening to what our soul already knows. And this belief also resonates with the spiritual wisdom of many other religions. And this message, which has been lost in the midst of time, is beginning to resurrect for a number of reasons. But let's look at who the Celts were first. As described in Newell's book, the Celts existed around 500 BCE and spanned the whole of Middle Europe. The Romans described them as viewing the feminine as sacred. In patriarchal Rome, this was unfathomable. The Celts listened for the truth that emanated from the earth and the human soul and prized the fact that all life comes from the union of the masculine and the feminine, leading them to honor both. Historically, the earliest recorded Celtic Christian community was in Lyon, in 2nd century Gaul. Irenaeus of Lyon was the first teacher. He opposed celibacy, believed in the naturalness of sexual relationships, and refused to dilute Jesus' humanity. From Celtic Gaul, this message crossed Britain and Ireland at the end of the 2nd century in oral form, allowing a confluence with pre-Christian wisdom. Pelagius was the first writer and teacher of significance in Celtic Britain. He was a monk from Wales and lived from 360 to 430. And today is St. David's Day. St. David was a 6th century monk, so happy St. David's Day, any of you who are Welsh here. And Pelagius was in direct conflict with St. Augustine of Hippo, you may have heard of. People feared Pelagius and what he stood for. He was accused by Jerome of spending too much time with women, teaching them how to read and interpret the scriptures. How very dare he? And by 4th century Rome, the place of the feminine had been subordinated within imperial Christianity. It was unacceptable for him to be teaching women to study, despite the gospel showing that Jesus had many women disciples around him at the time. Celtic wisdom remembers the sacredness of the feminine, the most beloved of saints being Bridget of Kildare. The goddess Bridget shape-shifted into the Saint Bridget and rivaled the Virgin Mary in the Celtic consciousness. Women celebrated Mass in Ireland until the 6th century, and 5th and 6th centuries were like a golden age in Celtic Christianity, in which Pelagius and Bridget thrived. Cut short, of course, in 597 with the arrival of the imperial Christian mission to Britain. By now, original sin was doctrine and celibacy established, whereas the Celtic Church had continued the practice of priestly marriage with open option celibacy in monastic life. So sexuality was a thorny subject in the early church. Correspondence between Augustine of Canterbury and the Pope are revelatory. When asked, he said, "Sexuality is not the issue, as this was needed for procreation. The problem was desire for sexual union. The fault lies in the bodily pleasure." The teachings of the church, he concluded, give husband and wife permission to have sexual relations, but this permission carries a warning: to avoid taking pleasure in the act. Well, there we have it, folks. If we are in any doubt as to how the Madonna whore dichotomy started, the theology of the Roman tradition, which caused countless men and women to feel ashamed or guilt-ridden, and paved the way for the objectification of the body, sexual abuse, and everything that flowed from it was to blame. The golden age of Celtic Christianity was over, and a major clash with imperial Rome had begun. Pelagius's teachings were condemned in 529, and in a papal encyclical in 594, Pope Gregory passed an edict that condemned Mary Magdalene to the role of prostitute and sinner. Misunderstanding, of course, her visionary understanding of Jesus' teachings, and condemning Western women to prejudice and misogyny. And at the Synod of Whitby in 664, the teachings of Rome, which believed in Jesus' disciple Peter had been the one to promote his teaching, was promoted over the Celtic belief that John was his disciple. John was much more in tune with Mary Magdalene and that lineage. The Celtic world tried to resist this, bless them, through art and sculpture, and the high-standing crosses came to their peak, these magnificent carved stone crosses reflecting the Celtic practice of worship outside in the great cathedral of earth, sea, and sky. And tragically, as it happened with the Virgin Mary in the 16th century at the hands of the Protestant reformers, the divine feminine spark was extinguished, and the tragic shift in Ireland's dominant form of Christianity away from the divine as immanent and feminine towards regarding it solely as masculine and transcendent. The marriage of so-called opposites had been torn apart, and a celebration of the feminine now became suspect. I'm going to take a It's a roller coaster ride, isn't it, folks? So let us pray. It's a moment to reflect, to go within. I want us to take some time to think about all these things, and you have a sheet of paper, and on it you have the translation of the original Lord's Prayer in Aramaic by Neil Donald Clott. You may know it, but Jesus was a man of his time, living in Palestine and speaking a language with a very deep beauty and resonance to it. And the prayers of the cosmos, in this book, he indicates how words in that language have multiple meanings. And when the original Aramaic was translated into Greek, many of these multiple meanings were lost. And in the first line, the father in Aramaic is parent. The Greek is a mistranslation, defining God as male, something which has stayed with us for 2,000 years. So let us read the Lord's Prayer together in Aramaic. O Bertha, Father, Mother of the cosmos, focus your light within us, make it useful. Create your reign of unity now. Through our fiery hearts and willing hands, help us to love beyond our ideals and sprout acts of compassion for all creatures. Animate the earth within us. We then feel the wisdom underneath, supporting all. Untangle the knots within so that we can mend our heart's simple ties to each other. Don't let surface things delude us, but free us from what holds us back from our true purpose. Out of you, the astonishing fire, returning light and sound of the cosmos. Amen. Awake, O my soul, and know the sacred dignity of your being. Awake to it in every living soul this day, honor and defend it, in heart and mind, in word and deed. Awake, O my soul, and know the sacred dignity of your being. Awake, O my soul, awake.
Looking to keep on your bed. Find bedtime. Keen to keep on your bed.
So here we are in our Unitarian Church with its roots in Christianity. The image of Jesus here, surrounded by children. And at the same time, we have this deep connection to the earth and the unity of all things. Our chalice is such a feminine symbol. Our favorite poets and thinkers, people like Richard Rohr, Ralph Waldo Emerson, John O'Donoghue. This creation spirituality which theologians like Matthew Fox developed, and where our dear friend and member Grace studied, has fascinating things to say about the way in which the early teachings of Jesus can be understood again today. Timeless wisdom in a world crying out for comfort. Grace wrote a lovely booklet summing up his teachings, and she had this to say about sin, as explained by Fox in his book, Original Blessing. The full redemption spiritual tradition is not nearly as ancient as the creation-centered one. The former goes back, as we've seen, to St. Augustine. The creation-centered tradition traces its roots to the 9th century BC with its very author of the Bible, to the Psalms, the wisdom books, and to Jesus and much of the New Testament. The darkened view of the original sin has cast a shadow, and we all carry scars. A spirituality that is centered in creation looks to the real beginning, that cloud of shining, incandescent radiance, the origin of all that is now. Matthew Fox continues, "It is interesting to me that honoring the Black Madonna, we have also seen how many characteristics of the healthy masculine she carries within herself. The Black Madonna is not just a mother, she's also a disruptor, a prophet, a warrior, who are roots as well as a mystic and prophet in these turbulent times." The Kali archetype there. The union of the Black Madonna and a green man prepares us for other unions such as yin-yang, the marrying of opposites, meaning the Divine Mother takes on characteristics of the Sacred Father, action, strength, while the Sacred Father takes on the characteristics of the Divine Mother, compassion and caring. Alan Tsai writes, "Yin the feminine and yang the masculine are interdependent. Yang would not grow without yin, and yin would not give birth without yang. Yin is born in the summer solstice, and yang in the winter." And Matthew Fox continues, "The key to harmony is not rest or stasis, but keeping the tension level and balanced, the union of the opposites." He suggests the archetypes men need to unleash are many, not least the green man, an ancient pagan symbol of our fundamental relationship to nature and to the spiritual warrior. And I believe this is the key to understanding what's happening to young people today. Andrew Tate, his Tate's alpha male persona, without recognition of his inner feminine, the Boys Don't Cry Brigade, have modeled a toxic masculinity. Did anyone see Donald Trump dressing down Zelensky yesterday? Well, you may have seen it. That for me was an example of toxic masculinity talking to authentic masculinity. And the two men there, I thought it was very interesting illustration of what I'm trying to explain, at least share with you today. And Matthew Fox believes that Jesus came to explode and unleash so much love in the world and to burst apart the patriarchal system. And our current global dark night is the psychotic masculine playing out in war and environmental destruction, violence against women and girls, and autocratic bullying leadership. 'Twas ever thus, you may say. However, the promise of Jesus was that the sacred masculine can galvanize the authentic masculine. In his Beatitude speech, Jesus was speaking with the tenderness of a mother. And Matthew Fox says the authentic sacred male consciousness is trying to be born in this dying patriarchy. So that the backlash that we're feeling is that something new is trying to emerge. He believes in the fusion between the green man and the Black Madonna. For Christians, this Black Madonna is, for those of us who've been studying for a while, this whole thing, it's Mary Magdalene. And the second coming is the coming together of these energies. So our third hymn is the Green Book, Universal Spirit, number 43. For the last 30 years or so, feminist scholarship has been looking closely at the role of women, both in the church and the wider world. With the discovery of the Nag Hammadi Gospels in 1945, those of Thomas and Philip, for example, and the Gospel of Mary in Cairo in 1896, we're given an insight into Jesus' followers and the socio-political atmosphere of the time. At the Council of Nicaea in 325, political choices determined which Gospels were chosen. And many of the more mystical Gospels were hidden and placed safely. The Gospel of Mary, as we have it, comes from 3 fragmentary papyrus scripts, 2 of which were found discarded on an ancient rubbish tip in Egypt. Many of the pages are missing, a challenge to scholars deciphering it. And the original text dates to around the middle of the 2nd century, a time when there was no single thing as Christianity. As already mooted, both women and men were widely recognized as church leaders. Original sin was not a concept, and the central motif was not the cross, obviously, but the fish. Mary Magdalene's authority as the first apostle to the apostles, as she was the first one to see the risen Christ, was eroded in favor of the patriarchal tradition of Peter. There is a Tibetan tradition of terma whereby important Buddhist teachings were intentionally buried in caves, hidden in crevices and rocks for hundreds of years, until such time as the world is ready to hear them. And when conditions ripen, then the timing is right for the teachings to be received when they're needed. When they're needed, they rise to the surface and are unearthed. Perhaps it's just now in the 21st century that the world is at last willing and able to receive the only known gospel attributed to a woman, a gospel which speaks of the original goodness, not the original sin, of a Jesus who came to restore, not to judge and condemn, and a universal teaching on how to rise up and find liberation from those internal and external authorities which seek to dominate and control. At a retreat a few weeks ago with Faye, we walked to the Church of St. Mary Magdalene in a little village, and we spoke the words of the Gospel of Mary out loud. It was very powerful. And here is a passage that you may find interesting. It will be read by Mike.
Peter said, "Did he really speak with Mary, a woman, without our knowing? Are we to listen to her? Did he favour her more than us?" Then Mary cried to Peter, "My brother, do you believe I made this up, or that I would lie about Jesus?" Levi admonished Peter, "You've always been quick to anger. Now I see you doubting a woman as worthy as Mary. Who do you think you are to dispute her testimony like an enemy? If Jesus made her upright, who are we to disown her? Jesus knew her well. That's why he loved her more than us. Let's be penitent, and don the robe of the perfect man and make him one with ourselves, as he taught. Let's proclaim his word, not make more laws beyond those he ordered. The disciples then disbanded and began to teach his gospel.
Thank you. So I'm optimistic. I know a lot of the world feels difficult and challenging, but I'm optimistic for a number of reasons. A lot of our institutions are imploding. Our old institutions are imploding before our eyes. Those who've centuries followed a path of hierarchical leadership and exclusion of the feminine and non-acceptance of the other. And I've confidence in a new generation of young men and women who want to do things differently. I recently had this confirmed during a conversation with a lovely young priest in Levant, Laura Darrell, who I spoke to about her poem, Easter by Mary Magdalene, which she'd put up on her blog. I asked her what her connection with Mary Magdalene was, and she told me that she had been brought up by a stepfather and uncle in the established church, neither of whom agreed or approved of women's ministry. But when she herself felt that God was calling her, she needed to find role models of those who'd been silenced and yet who'd kept going. And she turned to Mary Magdalene amongst others. She said she needed to find solidarity. I asked her a little bit about her hopes and fears for the future, and she said she'd been affirmed and championed by many male allies, both within the church and outside. And she believed that the church was in the process of a transformation, guided by the Holy Spirit. She agreed that any minority that had been oppressed, women, LGBT community, the Black community, would receive a pushback from patriarchy, but she expressed faith in the grassroots, and the prophetic visions rising. And she said that everywhere she was finding allies. During her years in theology training, her year was 50% men and women. And she said the college had a patriarchal structure, but her year helped challenge and change that because they simply had to. So, Pete, if we can hear, I've asked Laura if she was happy for us to hear her words, rather than me reading her poem. I thought it would be lovely for you to hear her words. You've got her poem on the other side of your sheet of paper. I suggest just listen to her rather than reading it, but you've got, if you miss a word or something, you've got it with you to take away. So this is Reverend Laura Darrell.
Hi everyone. So I've written a little poem about Mary Magdalene. She was only given a saint's day in 2016 and was given the official title of Apostle of the Apostles, but for a long time history has painted her as simply a prostitute or as a 2D caricature almost. And so this is a little imagination of what she might feel about that with a bit of poetic license. It's called Easter Day by Mary Magdalene. Woman, why are you crying? She hung her head and muttered under breath, my God, I'm tired. I'm tired of traipsing after men when my eyes are first to see the resurrected Jesus 3 days after Calvary. I'm tired of being labelled as a prostitute or whore when my singular desire is to serve my God and Lord. Why do you test me with this patriarchal slap when my lungs were fit to burst and etched in those lines on the map of risen life? Why am I crying? Because I stood there with your mother and I watched you hurt and dying, that's why. Where was Peter? The vine that he walked himself upon, it petered out. I shouted for him on that morning, rousing them with hope and glorious promise of new life. The fact that death was banished from our minds, our hearts, our lives. Why am I crying? Because they put me in a box and stole my voice before I even made the choice to share it. That's why. Because history is cruel and written by rulers and rulers, and the ones who go unnoticed were the ones you said with you. So God, I'm tired. We turned to her and learned from her the things he already knew. He held her hand, said, Mary, you've still got work to do.
I find you in the purple book. Do you want to say something before we sing, Miss Stewart?
Early Wednesday morning, the 58-year-old brother of my partner Lindsay left the planet in the hospital with our hands on his chest for the last 2 or 3 hours, just steadily blessing him on his way. The large story doesn't need to be told, but the small version is that the measure of his suffering in his whole life is now becoming exactly balanced by the redemptive changes that are taking place in the family dynamic since Wednesday. And at his funeral, which will be in some weeks' time, Lindsay, my partner, knowing the song May the Road Rise With You, from way back, even before I met her, it was sung at camps, at the end of Rainbow Spirit camps, such like. They would always sing it at the end at the time they were parting. They'd been together in a lovely way for maybe 2 weeks or whatever, and they would go in a circle and they would walk past each other and they sang the song round and round, facing each person as they passed each person to say goodbye in these camps. So then we had the idea that this would be sung at his funeral. And when I talk about the redemptive aspects of this passing, yesterday, his mother, his sister, and Lindsay, my partner, and his sister's daughter, and my partner's daughter, in our house, with me playing the piano, we sang this song to practice it, so that it wouldn't be too much of a shock, as when funerals can happen, and those who come, they say, what's all this? So we practiced it, and then early in the week, I can tell you, by the way, we had never sung together until yesterday. Now that in itself is measure of the changes. And then I rang or emailed, whatever, to Susie earlier and said, could we sing this? No, she said, can you think of another hymn for this week? I thought, oh, okay, this is the one. And I also know that Susie, you may not all know, she's somebody who sings around the times when people are passing. So the perfection of it is beyond words. So now we're going to sing it.
Would you like to light a candle for him?
Yes,
Can you
yes.
say his name?
Yes, and his name is Duncan Farquharson. And this is his lighter.
Yeah, there's a candle there, Stuart.
The conversation night before said, I'm really, I'm about the night.
And these apples are?
These apples come from an extraordinary tree, which is within eyeshot of his front door in Little House, which I would never have found unless we'd been visiting him. And it bears much fruit. In itself, the tree has a wonderful story, which is another matter. But we collect hundreds of these apples, and they're here for all the well, you can't all sample them probably, but I bought 12. You can take them with you. So here we go, Duncan Ferguson. Huh. Oh, I'm not used to this. He was very used.
Shall we sing it once or twice? What do you want?
3 times, please.
3 times. Usually 3.
Here we are.
3 times. Sing it 3 times. Lovely. Thank you, Stuart. So can this perennial wisdom from all spiritual traditions, captured beautifully by psychologist Carl Jung, who talked about the concepts of shadow, paradox, archetypes, these ancient teachings, feminine and masculine principles becoming animus and anima, are they as relevant today as they ever were as we navigate our way through a changing world? Could this be helpful and informative for young people today? I hope so. Please, if you want, those of you who are into this kind of cards, some of us are, some of us aren't, it's all good. Just pick a card from the Mary Magdalene deck. These are Faye's beautifully painted cards. And then I've got the little booklet there. And then over coffee, you can just see which woman disciple you've picked, and whether there's a message usually, and then there's a spiritual practice. There's a bit of the Bible, but it's please don't do it if you don't want to. It's really up to you. But and then don't walk away with the card. So, a final blessing. A Celtic blessing, of course, as we leave this sacred space and each of us goes out into our own world beyond this fellowship, in the knowledge that our lives have been enriched just by being here and sharing with each other today. Deep peace of the running wave to you. Deep peace of the flowing air to you. Deep peace of the quiet earth to you. Deep peace of the shining stars to you. Deep peace of the garden of peace to you. Amen.
Thank you, Susie, for leading our service today. Thank you, Stuart, for your music and your thoughts. Thank you, Mike, for reading. And thank you, Pete, for setting up and tech support, and Fiona for making the tea. So next Sunday, the service will be led by Jeff Levermore, President of the General Assembly of Unitarians. And on Wednesday, between 12:15 and 2, there will be piano music played by Pamela. Yes? Between 12:15 and 1. Honestly, you wouldn't believe we just cannot ever get this right. We've almost got a phobia about quiet reflection. But anyway, between 12:15 and 1, piano music. And you can come and have a cup of tea, a bit of quiet reflection, and come to all or part of that. And there's more details on the website. On Friday, the lunchtime concert at 12:30 will be celebrating International Women's Day, with Caroline Collingridge on the flute and Maggie Grimsdale on the piano, presenting a mix of work by women composers. Jennifer has sent me a big long list of things to share with you, so just bear with me. It's not my fault. She's asked me to remind you about a 4-week online course that she's running on Zoom on Tuesdays from the 18th of March to the 8th of April, from 7 to 8:15, exploring the theme of Lent, and it's entitled Wilderness. And I think there are some flyers in the entrance on the table out there with details. And she's also asked me to let you know about an event run by the Interfaith Contact Group on the Sikhs of Sussex on Wednesday, March the 12th from 7 to 8:30 at Hove Methodist Church in Portland Road. Yeah, I don't know if you have to book for that. You probably don't, actually. I think you can just turn up. Our annual membership service is being held on the 30th of March. And if you'd like to know more about being a member, please contact Jennifer. After that service, there'll be a community bring and share lunch and a congregational chat on topics, including services and eco-church. From today, after the first service every month, vegan refreshments will be served. So that's happening in a minute, and do stay for that and have a chat. And finally, we have a collection after the service, which is about helping us to keep financially afloat. So if you have any spare cash or plastic, we're happy to take either. And lots of people pay monthly by standing order, but collection bags will come your way in a moment. Or you can use the card reader, which is over there on the table. And there's also a collection box, the red collection box, which is for Night Stop, which is a charity for young people who have become homeless. And that's all, folks. Thank you.